Hey everyone! Such a beautiful day outside, isn't it wonderful? Um, kind of going over a few things again, and one of them is maybe putting my camera where I don't look like I'm just. It's a little bit better. Um, so, I wanted to talk a little bit about the difference between bookkeeping and accounting. I will usually tell people that I am an accountant due to my experience. And because those lines between bookkeeping and accounting at this point, with all of the software that's been coming onto the market over the past 20, 30 years, QuickBooks, of course, is one that really comes to mind. It really only developed market share in about, well, Intuit purchased the name in '96, I believe. And they started actually gaining market share in about '98, and I started using it in '99, which completely dates me. Um, I am only as old as I feel like I am, which means I'm about 29. um, so the difference between bookkeeping and accounting, a lot of people really consider that bookkeepers are the ones that are recording the transactions, and that is what I think of when I think of bookkeeping. I keep the company's books. I enter the transactions. I tend to not mess so much with the general journal unless unless it's really necessary. I do know how to use the general journal. But it used to be, back in the day when we used paper and bookkeeping was actually in, physical books and not on the computer, the bookkeeper would be the one that would write everything down, and then the accountant would prepare financial statements. Today, of course, we use, thank goodness, I complain a lot about my computer's not working, but you know what? I would never do accounting without a computer today. Right now, as a bookkeeper, I enter all of the day-to-day transactions. However, because those lines are blurred, I also prepare and create the financial statements. I talk to accountants quite frequently about what adjusting entries need to be entered, and those usually refer to depreciation. I don't mess much with amortization. That's usually something that I want an accountant to do. And but essentially, the accountant will tell me what adjusting entries to make. I do know how to make them. I understand why they're made. I just, at this particular moment in time, I would prefer that the accountant tell me what they want to do, because then it's on them. It really doesn't take a lot to do bookkeeping. It takes a lot to do it well. And when I refer to doing bookkeeping well, I mean that I can pass my books on to a CPA, and they are going to be able to understand what I've done and why without a lot of auditing required. I've been told that I have some of the cleanest books that some CPAs have seen. And it's whether or not you use a quote-unquote a bookkeeper as the title is going to depend on the size of your firm. Now, if you're a small company with only just a couple of locations and maybe a handful of employees, you'll use a bookkeeper. But as your company grows, you're going to kind of separate bookkeeping into different, accounting departments. I started doing accounting when I worked for a hospital system back east. It's Baptist Healthcare in Kentucky, headquartered in Louisville. I worked at their Paducah hospital, and I worked in accounts receivable, which we didn't call that. We called it patient accounts, which meant that I would bill Medicare, that's the section that I worked in, and then I would bill a secondary insurance, and then I would reach out to the patient and see if there was a balance left after that, and see if we needed to make payment arrangements or if they could just pay their bill. I didn't have anything to do with financial statements. My job was to get the claims paid. That was my only job. I didn't really come into the whole picture of accounting until I moved to Utah in '99 and took a job as an office manager. And all of a sudden, I had to know way more than just accounts receivable. But that's kind of a sample. You know, there's a lot of girls that have worked, well, a lot of guys too, that have worked as AR clerks or AP clerks or collections clerks, and I have done all those jobs. But then they think that they're accountants, and many times they really only understand the little piece that they've been working on. Big corporations will have huge accounting departments. They will have an accounts receivable department, an accounts payable department, an accounting department, which kind of oversees everything. They'll have a specific payroll, and these people are typically not, quote, accountants, although they may be. They're usually clerks that just enter the data. There may be accountants there, but they are not typically CPAs. Again, I kind of go back to, you need to understand what the different roles are in the financial services, bookkeeping and accounting industry to be able to utilize these people to their best, to the best of their abilities. If you're using your CPA to do your bookkeeping, then you're completely underutilizing your CPA, you're overpaying for bookkeeping. And I'm actually looking to create some strategic partnerships with CPAs because they don't like the day-to-day grunt work. I mean, I don't know of any other thing to call it. This is the grunt work. This is, you know, and they like to be the generals in charge. You can tell I come from a military family. The accounting clerks are usually supervised by accountants, sometimes even by CPAs, but certainly by accountants with at least a bachelor's degree. It used to be our journals. You know, we talk about the general journal, we talk about ledgers, and those actually come from, the reason we call it bookkeeping and keeping your books is that that's how they were kept. They were kept in a book. If you go to Office Depot or any of the office supply stores, you can sometimes find a 10-column ledger book. It's usually hard copy or hardbacked, and there would be separate books for each account. So you would have a ledger for your sales, and all it would be your sales money coming in and your invoices, you know, whether or not those have been paid. And then those balances would be transferred over to the general ledger where we would create the financial statements. And I actually remember doing this in high school, and it just seemed so tedious. I graduated high school in the last century, and it was tedious to me because at that time, you know, even in the 70s, I knew I wanted to work with computers. And so the idea of having to do all of this by hand just drove me insane. But the bookkeepers would keep these ledger books, and then they would create what's called a trial balance, which they would turn over to the accountant to put into the general journal. And one of the things that's important to know about accounting is that in order to be compliant with GAAP or GAAP, we use double entry bookkeeping, and that means that if something is debited, something is credited. You can't just put money in. The money has to come from somewhere. It can come from a customer, it could come from the owner, but there has to be an account. You know, if you're increasing cash, what is the offset account? So the bookkeepers would prepare a trial balance so that the accountants could, so that they could look and see if they've made any mistakes. And that's also where we get into the idea of reconciling an account. One of my sisters asked, you know, what does it mean to reconcile an account? My mother, who was an executive secretary, and then she was the managing owner. Dad went out and did the pest control. Mom ran the office. She was quote unquote the office manager back in the 70s for our business. And she just kind of laughed and said, well, that's when you put them in a room and you make sure that they're talking to each other. And I laughed because that's usually what we mean by reconciliation, get together and talk it out. But really what it is we're making sure that the transactions on the bank statement match the transactions in the ledger, or in the ledger, the bank ledger. So we want to make sure that what the bank says and what we say match so that they come down to zero. Air pressure is a wonderful thing. The wind is picking up and it closed my back door. And I have just been enjoying mild weather and being able to have the sunshine in here. That reminds me I need to check something really fast. Sorry about that. So I would, the bookkeeper would create a trial balance to make sure that they hadn't made any mistakes. And it's just kind of the nature of the beast. Mistakes are made. Decimal points get put in the wrong place. Sevens and nines start to look alike. That kind of thing. So the accountant may put in, adjusting entries, and that still is the case. And they go into the general ledger or the general journal, and the terminology depends on kind of what software you're using. QuickBooks says general journal. Other softwares, especially if they're European-based, will say general ledger. But it's just kind of a preference. It doesn't mean that they're different things. So then the accountant would put in, anything that was maybe earned but not recorded somehow. An example of that would be if you have a point of sale system that records your sales, but not all of that money deposits to your bank account. And maybe there's a lot of fees that come out that don't deposit to your bank account. Well, we can do an adjusting entry to account for that. We also, we also want to make sure that liabilities and expenses are in there correctly. And liabilities is a huge one. I've been surprised by how many people don't realize that a credit card is a liability. It's a loan. It's just a loan that we take out the loan, we spend some of that money, we pay that money back, we spend some more of that money. So it's revolving, and because it's revolving credit, some people don't realize that it's actually a liability. It is, in fact, a loan. It has to be paid back. Of course, today, we just use software for everything. Thank goodness. I hate T accounts. I mean, I use them when I'm trying to figure things out sometimes, but when I'm trying to, analyze what should be debited and credited. But can you imagine how miserable bookkeeping would be if we actually had to keep books in a book? Today we use software which automatically uses double entry accounting. It's usually very compliant with GAAP. The debits always equal the credits. I remember taking my accounting classes and just sweating because the balance sheet, the accounting equation is that assets equal liabilities plus equity. And if they're not exactly equal to the penny, we would have to go back and redo them. And it just drives me crazy sometimes because, again, you would kind of drop a penny, you would hit the wrong key, you would, just little mistakes just kind of creep in. And then the balance sheet is where we would make sure that everything was correct. And I just kind of cringe at thinking of trying to do that today. Now, everything is computerized. So when I pull up a balance sheet, it balances. When I pull up a profit and loss, it's providing everything was set up correctly, it's all there. So that's really basically the difference between, what a bookkeeper does. They do the day-to-day stuff. What the accountant does is they do the top-down view of your accounts and make sure that everything is correct. Bookkeepers and accountants should be working hand in hand. In fact, a bookkeeper should work very well with an accountant, and if they don't, then, well, all I'm going to say is they should work really well with your accountant. Sometimes there's personality conflicts and the like, but everything should go really well. That's it for today. I just wanted to talk a few minutes about the difference between accounting and bookkeeping. I am not an accountant because I don't have a college degree. I am a bookkeeper, but I should have my degree pretty soon, so that'll be exciting. I can change my title. Have a wonderful evening, enjoy the beautiful weather, and I will look forward to talking to you tomorrow.